This year, they're saying in the next 3 years, DaaS is going to get 20% market penetration by 2025 of that same target segment. So let me ask you a question. What drew you to be an early adopter of DaaS, and, kind of just why there?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely a hot topic today with like hybrid remote working and everything more
Right.
popular than ever. Where like virtualization technology is being used by businesses that never saw use it before because it was too complex, and that's one of the reasons why DaaS and managed DaaS, like a managed virtual desktop environment, is there in for example Azure to help customers with like Windows 365. But just going back to what your question originally was, like what got me hooked into VDI, really the first like impression I had around like desktop virtualization VDI in general was like, this is awesome. I run my
Yeah.
PC somewhere else, right? And I can just consolidate everything somewhere and centralize, manage that environment for like thousands of people. And I really like that kind of technology because we all are tech savvy, right? Engineers in our heart, and
Yeah.
seeing that technology and that video rendering and all works all great with different like low factor clients and such. That was really something I like. That's where I want to invest my career in. And at the moment, public clouds were really, yeah, like starting in like 2012 or 2014. Was
Yeah.
like when Azure started, there wasn't really a VDI solution on top of the clouds. And I really started to invest my career in how to lift and shift workloads first, and did all kinds of bloggings and everything around that as well. And at that moment, like companies like Citrix were as well in a reinventing themselves, and how do we
Yeah.
go to the cloud as well? And that was something, yeah, that was an easy connection for me. Like, hey, I like virtualization technologies, server-based computing, VDI, and such. And how can I modernize that? How can I make that better for like the customer I was working for? And it was really like one of the first or the only one in the company that did that, because I believed in it. Like, this is the future of desktop virtualization. And you saw, of course, Exchange Online transforming into or Exchange on premises transforming into Exchange Online and Office
Yeah. That's right.
365. So that was a great example of that movement as well. So yeah, that's kind of the reason why I was like really inspired, and the community around virtualization got me hooked in as well, and created sort of a family around it as well. So it's kind of business as well as personal, a very great pleasure to be yeah, active in the virtualization space. So
No, and I totally agree with you, right? And the first time I saw it, so I was at Citrix, right, and I was running worldwide pre-sales strategy for 8 years after being acquired via AppDNA. But for me, when we started seeing Citrix Cloud become the kind of platform to manage both on-prem and started seeing public cloud adoption around workspaces, that got me really excited. And that's in fact part of the reason I kind of flipped over to Rimo3 to focus mainly on getting folks to a more modern work style around the public cloud. But the thing around DaaS that was most exciting to me is that VDI, like you, I'm a child of VDI, right? Like, I came from that space, I worked in that space, and for me, I'm very passionate about, hey, do the right user segmentation, do the right application segmentation, do the right testing, do the right deployment. So basically, deliver the right application via the right workspace to the right user, right? And that's easier said than done. And I know a lot of enterprises have historically struggled with some of those components around user segmentation. But that's why VDI to me was a little bit closed off. It was kind of an old boys club that only enterprises with, I don't know, 10,000 seats and above would really kind of get to play in. Now, you, in your current role, leading a big chunk of the Windows 365 Microsoft engineering team, I think Windows 365 and maybe even AVD to an extent, bring VDI to the masses. If you're car dealership with 50 employees, you can now take advantage of like VDI. Like that's the part about DaaS that got me most excited. I don't know. What do you think from your perspective in terms of the market adoption that Gartner's talking about, these 20%? Are you seeing it across SMB and enterprises?
Yeah, we definitely see that, and you're spot on in the transformation to the cloud. It's way more approachable for customers to use virtualization, and that's really excited to see because the technology is something that I think most customers really believed in. It was just too complex to get and too expensive as well over the last 2 to 3 decades. So here, those cloud services like Windows 365 AVD really helped removing that friction, moving to the cloud, and between the kind of business like size of the business as well as the enterprise size, they can pick now solutions to do AVD themselves on Azure or go more like in an automated SaaS offering for Windows 365, and that's an offering that comes from Microsoft Cloud like M365 that hasn't been done by Microsoft before. We had, of course, remote desktop services and Azure Remote that was there as well. But like since the last 4 or 5 years, it really started to take off and become a real good service to land your production workloads on. And that's what we see from smaller, medium businesses up to like large enterprises with like 50,000 like VMs in Azure, for example. So,
yeah.
So, that's really interesting. And from my perspective, I thought the SMB would adopt DaaS first. And maybe this is just me being an app nerd, right? Like the fact is a lot of these SMBs with 100 seats and below, they don't tend to write their own software. They don't have a lot of legacy technical debt. They have a lot of COTS or commercial off-the-shelf applications. They, like Rimo, for instance, we're born in the cloud, right? Everything that we do is basically a SaaS offering. So we run a lot of Windows 365 today. Do you think that like the early adopters, especially around the SMB, is due to the lack of complexity or just, I shouldn't say lack of complexity, that's the wrong way. Is it because of the simplicity of onboarding and turning a key and saying, here's your desktop? Like what's driven the success in the SMB that's now trickling into the enterprise?
Yeah, that's a very good point. It really depends per business always, right? But you're right, like small, medium businesses don't have that much legacy / requirements coming from an on-premises environment, and therefore the onboarding process is way easier. So for example, Windows 365 Business, which is targeted for businesses from 1 to 200 users, is really like a full cloud solution. So no on-premises Active Directory is needed or whatsoever. It's really all Azure AD native. And small, medium businesses like that because it's easy. They can just log on after like 10, 15 minutes, just click on some settings, and then they're good to go. And that's kind of the new way as well of doing IT as a service and things like that as part of Microsoft, as part of cloud services in general, moving that friction, moving up to a cloud solution. And that's what small businesses, it makes it easier for them to move to a DaaS solution. But we see large enterprises doing to avoid sort of the more broader scenario, start with smaller use cases, right? Like freelancers or contractors or developers or just like acquisition workloads. They did an acquisition globally on another side of the globe on the planet and want to kick the tires fast and get those folks up to speed without shipping laptops and such. That's something we see pretty often as well. And then once they get convinced and have that workload going on, they expand it to the information workers and frontline workers as well. So there are different dynamics we see from small, medium businesses as well as up to enterprises. But the technology is not, immature or something. The technology just supports it. It's more the requirements for going completely to Azure AD, for example, that some customers still struggle with a little bit because the apps are still relying on Kerberos and things like that. And that's where you guys can help us with as well. So
Rimo3 offers automated pre-deployment testing of Windows applications, OS updates, and security patches. Use unattended automation to test and assess application readiness for Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 365, Azure Virtual Desktop, as well as identifying MSIX and multi-session suitability. Your apps, your workspace, our priority.